All right, so we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the call. I am super excited this evening. We got some great information. We have some great speakers that you guys are going to hear from. If you don't know who I am, my name is Ebony Gibson, and I am the CEO of Canigrieve, which is a company that I launched. We actually just celebrated 1 year in business, focusing on really just encouraging people, educating people to rise above grief. We have different sectors where we offer products, we offer services, and then the events. And so this is our first event that we've ever done, and it just so happens to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So we are super excited. We actually partnered with a nonprofit called the Brem Foundation, which you're going to learn all about this evening. And obviously, as a part of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we have Brem, which they are going to be going over some information that's definitely going to be impactful. Okay. So tonight we'll be joined by radiologist, Dr. Mansi Vaishnav, and Brem CEO, Claire Dockery. They will share insights and personalized breast care, understanding risk factors, and correlated screening options, and the importance of self-advocacy and breast health. Claire will discuss the Brem Foundation and their work to advance early detection for breast cancer, reduce health disparities, and barriers to care. And so with that, we will watch a really quick video to kick things off. Once again, thanks so much for jumping on this evening.
This is a doctor's office. You find yourself waiting here. Your clothes are folded, you feel weird wearing this gown, and the air conditioner is a bit too strong. It is moments like this where you could change everything. No, not like that. I mean, for your health. How? Simply just by asking questions. You and your doctor are a team. Team Your Health. Woo! And if your team's gonna win, then you need to get in the game. All right, no more sports metaphors, I promise. Here are the top questions to ask your doctor about breast cancer. Number 1, does my family history matter when it comes to breast cancer? The more people in your family who've had it, the younger they were when they were diagnosed, and the closer they are related to you, the higher your chances are of getting it. If you have a strong family history, ask your doctor about genetic testing. It's really important. Family history raises your risk of breast cancer, but even if you don't have breast cancer in your family, you're still at risk. Number 2, do I have dense breasts? Half of women over age 40 have dense breast tissue. It's natural and normal. Density matters because dense tissue looks cloudy on a mammogram. This means cancer is really hard to see. For women with dense tissue, mammograms without other screenings can hide up to 50% of cancers. Not great. On top of that, dense tissue makes it 4 to 6 times more likely that you will get breast cancer. You can't tell if you have dense breasts by how they look or feel. The only way to tell if you have dense breasts is to have a mammogram. Which leads us to our next question. Number 3, do I need more than a mammogram? Some women need screenings in addition to a mammogram, like if you have dense breasts. On an ultrasound, the dense tissue is still white, but the cancer is black, making it easier to see. For people with very dense tissue, an MRI might be the right tool. It's like the superhero of finding cancer. In some states, insurance must cover breast ultrasound and MRI. If yours doesn't, talk to your doctor or navigator for next steps and options for support. Asking your doctor about these essential tests in addition to your mammogram could save your life. Number 4, how often should I get screened and what tests do I need? Early detection is the key to fighting breast cancer. If you find it early, you have a 95% chance of beating it. So talk to your doctor about screening every year starting at age 40 if you're at average risk, and earlier if you have other risk factors. Not all doctors agree on when to start and how often, but the data shows that starting at 40 will save the most lives. It could be a game changer. You're probably thinking, I'll never remember everything I learned today, and you're probably right, which is why we wrote all this down for you on a webpage. This whole video, this set, these lights, the camera guy, the props, the Brem Foundation, this whole team have come together to make this video. And we did this for you. And that's because you are the key to pushing back on breast cancer. Early detection is so powerful, it could save your life. If you get engaged and, dare I say, get in the game, you could change everything. So be brave. Ask these questions, and if you forget, visit breasthealthquestions.org for a free downloadable list. Lastly, share this video with someone you love.
Awesome. I just loved that video and all the aesthetics. I know it was a lot of information in the video, so let's try to break it down a little bit. It sounds like when you go to see a doctor for a checkup, in order to figure out when to screen and how often, you first need to understand your individual risk factors. Dr. Mancy, can you review what these risk factors could be and how to find out if you have them?
Yes. So just like you said, that video was great. It's nice that we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So risk factors for breast cancer. The number one risk factor is just being a woman, unfortunately. If you're a woman, you already are at risk of breast cancer. I know they talked about family history, but in fact, 75% of women that get breast cancer don't have a family history. So that's 3 out of 4 women who are going to get diagnosed with breast cancer don't actually have a mom or a sister with breast cancer. However, if you have a family history, that increases your risk, especially a first degree relative. So then that's just like I gave a mom or a sister. And then a lot of people say, you know, my grandmother had it, or my dad's mom had it, or my dad's sister. It doesn't matter what side of the family it's on. It can be both sides of the family, either side of the family. If you have a family history, you definitely have an increased risk. And if you have a family history, there's a chance you have a genetic mutation. So genetic mutations are basically your body has a mutation that decreases your cell's response to suppress the cancer. So what that means is, you know, we hear a lot about BRCA1, BRCA2, or BRCA, and I know, you know, some celebrities have had it, like Angelina Jolie, I think, has the BRCA mutation, and she had bilateral prophylactic mastectomies because if you have that genetic mutation, you're much more likely to develop breast cancer. But there's a lot of other genes that are implicated in breast cancer, like CHEK2 or PTEN. And so basically what that means is if you're somebody who has a sister or a mother or a grandmother on either side of the family with breast cancer, it'd be good to talk to your doctor about, you know, am I a good candidate for genetic testing? Because genetic testing can tell you if you have one of these genetic mutations, and then you automatically will be more likely to get a lot of things done differently. So you might get screened earlier, you might qualify for an MRI, and we'll go a little bit into that a little further on.
Awesome, awesome. And is there a certain age for the genetic testing?
So are you cut out the first part of your question cut out? Do you mind repeating it?
Yes, I was saying, is there a certain age requirement if you wanted to do the genetic testing?
You know, so there's not necessarily an age requirement. What we tell people is by age 25 is around a good time, especially if you have a family history. So there's two things. Let's say your mom got diagnosed with breast cancer in her 30s, then definitely in your 20s, in your early 20s, you should be looking into genetic testing. But even if you don't have a mom that was diagnosed that young, or if she was diagnosed later in life, or you have a sibling, anything like that, I think by age 25 would be a good time to speak to your primary care physician about, do I qualify for genetic testing? And there's a lot of ways they can determine if you're somebody who would benefit from that. And then, you know, if you're 25 is very young, but 30, between 25 to 30 is a good time to start figuring out if you might have a genetic mutation, because the earlier you screen in those circumstances, the better it is.
Absolutely. So I know in the video, they talked a lot about breast density as a risk factor. I think breast density is not something everyone knows about. Can you talk a little bit more about breast density?
Yeah, so your breast density is basically the ratio of your connective tissue to your fat tissue. So All of our breasts are made up of fatty tissue and connective tissue. Some people have more connective tissue and some people have more fatty tissue. And basically why that's important is over 50% of women with dense breasts are going to, over 50% of women in the United States have dense breast tissue. And so I can break that down a little bit further. But yeah, basically what that means is the ratio of connective tissue to your fatty tissue inside your breast.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Now, how can you tell if you have dense breasts and how are they measured?
So basically the only way to know if you have dense breasts is by a mammogram. I think it's common for people to say, oh, well, my breasts look like this, or they're this size, or they have always been this way, so I must have dense breasts, or I must have fatty breasts. Actually, there's really no way to tell just by looking at them. The mammogram is actually how you can tell how dense they are. So a good analogy for a mammogram is the sky. So if you think of a blue sky, just like your background with clouds in it, how the mammogram works is fatty tissue comes up as the blue part of the sky and connective tissue comes up as the clouds in the sky. So a very dense breast will have more clouds than blue sky. And a very fatty breast, which is the other end of the spectrum, will have more blue sky and less clouds. Most women fall in between those two ends of the spectrum. So most women have an average amount of clouds, an equal amount of clouds to the blue sky. The problem is breast cancers come up very similar to what a cloud would look like. And so it's really hard to tell when you're looking at a very dense breast. You can't tell apart the clouds. Just like that, it's very difficult to tell apart a cancer from the connective tissue. Some other information about how you can tell: you can't feel your breast density, but a mammogram, every mammogram comes with a density rating. So it's rated from A to D. Like I was saying, A is very fatty, that would be a blue sky. B is scattered density, scattered tissue, that would be a little bit of clouds, but mostly blue sky. C is heterogeneously dense. That means you have pretty much 50-50, but it's more clouds than it is blue. And then extremely dense is it's all clouds. You really can't see through it, and it comes up white on the mammogram because fat would come up darker, and so it's really not a lot of fat. One thing that a lot of people don't know is if you're thin and you're young, you're more likely to have dense breast tissue, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that that's always true. We see lots of women that are well into their 70s and 80s that are very dense, and so that's kind of something you can't always go by, but it tends to run true for people. You are supposed to get notified by your state in 38 states if you have dense breast tissue. So what that means is when you get your mammogram, you'll get your results in writing, and it'll tell you your breast density is A, B, C, or D. And if you have very dense breasts, they should let you know so that you can kind of prepare for that going forward if you need any supplemental examination.
Awesome. I love the way you're breaking everything down. So the video says if you have dense breasts, make sure to ask for other screenings in addition to your mammogram. Can you tell us how the conversation about density plays out in the real world with your patients?
Yeah, so unfortunately, in women with dense breasts, and like I said, over 50% or half of the women in this country have dense breasts, or they're either considered a C or a D. So unfortunately, half of cancers can be missed on women with dense breasts. And so basically what the conversations I tend to have in women with dense breasts, I go to them and I tell them, your mammogram looks good, but there is a chance that there's some tissue that we may not be able to see through on the mammogram, would be better evaluated on the ultrasound. And you saw in the video, on an ultrasound, dense breast tissue also comes up sort of white or bright. But in those cases, an ultrasound can show a cancer or any sort of other lesion that's not a cancer, like a cyst, as a dark lesion. And so usually what I do is I tell my patients, you have dense breast tissue, you should talk to your doctor about, and this is just a suggestion or a recommendation, but you can talk to them about getting screening ultrasounds. So an ultrasound basically uses sound waves to go through to look through the breast tissue, and it's a supplement to mammogram. Mammogram is always required, and it's the first step. Ultrasound can be seen as a second step. And then in some states where insurance pays for MRIs for breast density for screening, an MRI is the most sensitive test we have, and it's something that you get contrast for. So you get intravenous contrast, you go to the MRI, you get the test done, and it's a third way to look at the breast. Speaking of insurance, the Brem Foundation has been instrumental in basically passing legislation and getting insurance to cover supplemental screening. They're actually working with multiple state legislators to figure out how other and more states can cover and can pass mandates to provide that information, what your breast density is, and to provide information such as supplemental screening. When I was in fellowship with Dr. Brem in DC, she had a rule that every person that had a C or a D density, which is more dense, when you gave them their paperwork for that day, or when they were given their results, they had a little piece of paper that said, you have dense breasts, you can consider supplemental screening with an ultrasound, and here's the information to getting that done here. So that's kind of the things that the Brem Foundation works with, getting other places to get, so that more people can have access and information to this.
Awesome, awesome. Can breast density change over time in the same person?
Yes, so your breast density can change in the same person. What the general way that your breast tissue goes is, when you're younger, you tend to be more dense. Now, that's not always true for every young person. But if you do have dense breasts when you're younger, as you get older, you get something called fatty involution. So that sounds bad, but really what it means is it's just that your breast tissue is sort of regressing. It's because your hormones are regressing. And so your breast tissue gets less dense the older you get. But there are things that can make you get more dense too. So if you're taking hormone therapy, you're taking estrogen for various reasons, that can make your breast tissue more dense. But yes, breast tissue, not only can it vary as you get older, it can actually vary if you're pregnant. It can get more dense in response to pregnancy hormones. If you're breastfeeding, it can get more dense. And then it can also be kind of changing through time. If you gain some weight, or if you lose some weight, your breast tissue will change in response to that. And some people, it tends to be more dramatic. It just depends on how you carry weight and how responsive you are to hormones. But the answer to your question is yes, it can definitely change from year to year and as you get older.
And I love how you broke that down, because our body is always changing, and we don't always tend to think, why it's changing. We don't think about all the factors, like you said, taking hormones and weight gain and different things like that. So I love how you broke that down.
Thank you.
What should a patient of average risk do if her doctor does not recommend starting screening at age 40?
That's a good question. So average risk is somebody who, like me, I don't have a family history. I have 2 sisters and a mom, and nobody in my family has, been diagnosed with breast cancer as of yet. I don't have any other risk factors that I know of. And if you do my risk stratification, I would be considered average risk. So I have a less than 20% lifetime chance of getting breast cancer. So if you're of average risk and you're in the same scenario as me, ideally, screening mammograms for breast cancer screening begin at age 40. That does vary depending on what organization you go off of. So if you're Googling it, because that's very common, the United States Preventative Task Force, they're reviewing their recommendations right now, but their current recommendations suggest age 50 to 75. The ACS suggests screening annually, so every year from 40 to 44, and then I think 55 and up, it changes. It can go every other year, or you can remain annually. So if your doctor isn't suggesting, so you always talk to your primary care first, see what their recommendations are, because like I said, different people go off of different guidelines. But if your doctor hasn't suggested screening at the age of 40, then ask for yourself, say, hey, I'm 40, I would like to get screened. They can't tell you no, and always, you're your number one advocate, your body. So tell them, I would like to be screened starting at age 40, because at age 40 is when we actually tend to see, between 40 to 50, that 10 years is when we tend to see some of the most preventative cancers. You're still considered young, you still have hormones, you're still usually premenopausal. So that's a good time to say, hey, I would like to get screened. And if for some reason, this usually doesn't happen, but let's say you get a doctor that gives you pushback and they say, no, I don't think you need any screening. There are outpatient imaging centers that will do your mammogram without a referral. So that's another option. If your doctor says no, or you're somebody who, let's say, you don't see a doctor and maybe for financial reasons, maybe for work related reasons, just your general socioeconomic status, there are ways to get around that. You can go straight to an imaging center and say, I'm here for my mammogram, I'm X years old, and you can do that.
Awesome. And I love how you said you are your biggest advocate, because that's so true. You know, sometimes people don't say anything, but they assume it's because the doctor didn't say anything. But you have to be able to speak up for yourself. So I love how you answer that.
Thank
Moving
you.
right along. It sounds like there are reasons for some women to have other types of screening beyond mammograms, like ultrasound or MRI. Can you tell us more about these and when someone might need them?
Yeah, so you know, every breast or every person, every patient is an individual. So that actually even goes in medicine. We like to kind of do things off of a standard, but everybody should have a personalized individual approach. So what I think is a good way to approach this is at age 40, if you're of average risk, you get your screening mammogram. Your screening mammogram should tell you what your breast density is. If you have dense breast tissue, it's a good idea to inquire about supplemental screening. So like I said, that's an ultrasound, that would be sound waves. That's a different way to look at the breast. You know, a mammogram is low dose radiation. It shows the breast in a specific way. An ultrasound is no radiation, it's sound waves, and it shows the breast in a specific way. And then an MRI is no radiation, and it's a magnet, and it shows the breast in a specific way. So all of these help each other. The first step is always a mammogram. You can't skip the mammogram, but you can supplement it. And basically the best, you know, the best answer to this question is that everyone, depending on your risk factors and depending on what your breast density is, gets a personalized approach. I think this is becoming more common, but this is something to sort of make note of. Mammograms are now done in 3D. That's always an option. So what that means is when I'm looking at the mammogram, I can scroll through it. They used to only ever be done in 2D. I was practicing and I did my residency in Mississippi. And in a state like Mississippi, it's not common to get 3D mammograms. And some insurances make you pay extra for the 3D part of it. Now it's becoming more common, so insurances are starting to cover that more. But you know, that's something to ask about when you get your mammogram. Hey, can I get a 3D? And if it's not covered by your insurance, say, hey, can I get something else that might be covered, like an ultrasound? But if you're dense, there's a good chance it's going to be covered.
Wasn't trying to let me unmute, but that is awesome. I love that. 3D. I didn't know anything about that. So that's awesome. And we can ask for it.
Yeah.
If those other type of screenings are better for some women, do they still need an annual mammogram?
Yeah, so I get that. I get asked that a lot. You know, a lot of young women, they come in, they say, I'm dense. You always recommend an ultrasound. Can't I just get the ultrasound and skip the mammogram? And some people are afraid of the radiation, but yeah, so the standard of care is to start with a mammogram. And like I said, it's very, very low dose radiation. You actually get more background radiation just from like, you know, radon from like heaters and stuff like that than you would from a mammogram. So the mammogram won't cause you any harm. And it's the best way to check every year starting at age 40, is anything changing? These other tests like ultrasounds and MRIs are just a supplement. So they're just there to help the mammogram out. So even if you get an ultrasound or an MRI, I think the mammogram is the best first step and the best continued examination.
Awesome. Mammogram first. What about lifestyle and other factors that may increase your risk, like alcohol or your diet or smoking?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So unfortunately, you know, I try not to use, or we at the Brem Foundation and myself, we try not to use the word preventative, only because there's not been any proven way to prevent breast cancer. I get a lot of patients and it's heartbreaking because they say, hey, I'm vegan, I follow a specific diet, and I got diagnosed with breast cancer. Like, what did I do wrong? And the real answer to that question is You didn't do anything wrong, and we can't prevent it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. The real key is, and it's hard to tell people this because they say, I've got breast cancer, that's the end. The truth is breast cancer is very treatable, very curable when caught at an early stage. So the best thing you can do for yourself is to start screening as soon as possible. And what that means is, if you're average risk at age 40, if you're high risk, earlier than that. And there's different ways that applies to people. So if your mother got diagnosed with breast cancer at age 45, it's 10 years before her diagnosis. So you would start screening at 35. But let's say your mom got diagnosed at 55. So age 40 comes first before 45. So you would just start your screenings at age 40, basically. So 10 years before your first degree relative, if it's before the age of 40. And then, if it's not before the age of 40, then everybody should start at age 40. But there are ways you can reduce your risk. So you can't prevent it, but you can reduce your risk. A couple of ways that you can reduce your risk of getting breast cancer is alcohol, unfortunately. I think that there's real data that shows that drinking alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer. So, that doesn't mean you can't ever drink, but that means if you're somebody who drinks daily, regularly, more than, 1 to 2 drinks a day, it's worth considering cutting down. And if you're somebody who doesn't drink at all and can do without it, then it's worth considering cutting it out altogether. A big risk factor of getting breast cancer is actually obesity. And the reason for that is that our fat cells, the more fat cells you have, they actually produce their own estrogen. So when you have high levels of estrogen, being a woman is already a risk factor. And then if you are overweight and you have a lot of fat that's overproducing estrogen, you're increasing your risk. So living by a low fat, high protein, high exercise, that kind of healthy lifestyle will reduce your risk. I say that to say you can still be very healthy and still get a breast cancer, but it's just something that can reduce your risk, basically. And then exercising, decreasing your anxiety, living a life that's very, not very, but as peaceful as you can make it. So following a lifestyle where you might meditate, or you have something you do to kind of get rid of your stress, whether that's working out or hanging out with friends, anything that just sort of contributes to your general well-being. Getting enough sleep, I feel like that doesn't get enough credit. Definitely need to get enough sleep. So all these things can help you and reduce your risk. But with that being said, if you're somebody who does all this and you still get a cancer diagnosis, it's sad and it's scary, but it's okay.
Wow, I love how you answered it by saying there's no preventative measures you can take, but there are things you can do to reduce that. I love that. And so let's shift gears a little bit. And I just want to take a moment to ask about getting screened during the ongoing pandemic. Even though we're moving forward, we're still in a pandemic, kind of. And I think we probably all heard about how dramatically breast screenings dropped during the early days of the pandemic. Are they still down? And can you share more about the current state of screening?
Yes, so that is a really good question. So average screening, it is down since the pandemic. So it's up from 2019 to 2020. It has gone a little bit, but it's not back up to the levels that it was at pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, screenings actually declined by 90%. And there's a projected 10,000 people that are going to be affected by breast cancer as a direct effect of the decreased screenings. So unfortunately, that's something that we've sort of taken a step back on. But I want to make it very clear and be very, open with everybody in regards to the pandemic. You should definitely continue to get screened. Most places, if not all places that perform screening mammograms and even diagnostic imaging, are taking preventative measures. So masks are still required. And in most major hospitals throughout the country, the staff is required to be vaccinated. I know that there are some exceptions to this, but speaking in a general sort of widespread way, I think almost all staff members, especially physicians, technologists, nurses that work in the breast centers, are vaccinated. They are wearing masks. Where I'm working at Memorial Hermann in Houston, Texas, masks are required throughout the entire they have multiple locations. So whether it's the hospital, whether it's the outpatient centers, everybody's required to wear a mask. And breast cancer is one of those things where lots of women who are currently being treated for breast cancer are coming to breast cancer centers to check their treatment responses. And so we try to be really diligent to make sure that there's no exposure to COVID, or low exposure to COVID. And, we don't want to take any sort of risk with these people who are already going through treatment. So I want, everybody to know, do not skip your screening. Make every effort to be there unless there's some sort of extenuating personal circumstance. Don't let any other circumstance like pandemic, government, or anything like that stop you from getting your screen, because this is for your health. And an early screen and an early detection can prevent and save your life. And that's exactly what we're here for.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that detailed answer. And you guys, I do want to backtrack a little bit because I did not let you know that Dr. Mancy is qualified. So I do just want to share with you a little information about her, even though she's already spoken. I have to give you your flowers. My apologies. And so Dr. Mancy was raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, and attended Louisiana State University, where she obtained her undergraduate degree in basic sciences in 2009. She obtained her MD summa cum laude from the American University of Antigua. She went to train in diagnostic radiology at the University of Mississippi Medical Center and graduated in June 2020. She completed a year as a Brem Fellow in diagnostic breast imaging at the George Washington University in 2021. In her free time, she enjoys cooking, exercising, and spending time with her family. And I want to thank you so much for taking some of your time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the Brem Foundation. Thank you to Canigrieve. I'm super excited for your company. Congratulations. I think that's super cool. And I'll definitely be sharing all of your Instagram stuff as much as I can, as well as the Brem Foundation, which is such an asset. And I'm super excited to be here. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. And so now, guys, we are going to shift our program and we are going to have Miss Claire on the line share with you guys a little bit more about the Brem Foundation and everything they're doing to make a huge impact in our community and to help save lives. So thank you so much, Miss Claire, for being on.
Thank you, Ebony. I really appreciate you inviting me to join tonight. I'm pleased to learn about Canigrieve, and like Monse would like to continue to support you in this effort. I'll just take a few moments tonight to talk about the Brem Foundation, and then we can answer any questions you might have. I started as the CEO of the Brem Foundation back in May. So I'm fairly new, to be honest. Cheryl Skillen, who's the chair of our board on this call, would know a lot more about it than I do, although I feel like I have learned a lot and gotten up to speed fairly quickly since I joined in May. And Natalie from our team, who's on the line too, is also very knowledgeable about the organization. It was the Brem Foundation was started years ago by Dr. Rachel Brem, Cheryl, and a woman named Sue Apple. And really the focus is on early detection and to use the tools that we have. And we focus on education, access, and advocacy to reduce mortality from breast cancer to, as I mentioned, increase early detection and increase survival rates. And we really want to make sure that women are screened properly on time, every time, so that breast cancers are caught earlier and at more curable stages. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have a three-prong approach at the Brem Foundation. We focus on education. And if you go to our website, and we will flash that up, I believe, during this presentation, bremfoundation.org, there is a wealth of really amazing educational resources, a breast health bill of rights, and just many different pieces of information about what women need to know in order to protect their health and in order to understand their risk factors, and to ensure that they are doing everything they can to protect their health and to preserve their breast health and to detect their cancer early if they are diagnosed. We have some really groundbreaking PSA videos that we've worked on, and we are actually in a partnership with WebMD circulating those videos across the country now. I'm a huge fan, and I think many people are, of these videos. They're very accessible. They're not super technical, and I think they really sort of speak to women around, again, early detection and what I need to know about breast health in order to advocate for myself. Our second pillar is access. We have some access programs, where we focus on underserved women here in the DC area. We have a program called the B Fund, where we fund the costs of essential screenings such as ultrasound and MRI beyond mammography that some women are unable to afford because they're either uninsured or underinsured. And we also have a innovative partnership with Lyft, the rideshare service, where we work to remove transportation as an access barrier. We just recently met with a woman, a really amazing young woman named Belsi from Guatemala, who is 29 years old and was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, breast cancer. And we talked with her, and without the support of the Brem Foundation, she wouldn't have been able to afford the tests that she needed to get her diagnosis or the transportation to get to her screening appointments. So these access programs are really important, and we look forward to growing them in the coming year. Advocacy. Brem uses our voice to affect policy change around early detection of breast cancer. In 2018, we passed a bill with the DC Council on breast density notification. I think many people are aware right now that women who have dense breast tissue are at higher risk for developing breast cancer. So we push for that bill at the DC level. Not only does it have notification component, but it also has a component for insurance for women who can't afford the ultrasound and MRI tests that I mentioned earlier. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that Brem launched a federal advocacy agenda. So we're going to be pushing for legislation at the national level so that we can touch millions of women and ensure that we are getting to touching that many more lives with our important work. So these are our 3 pillars. Next slide. As I mentioned, we really focus very specifically on early detection. And you can see here that if breast cancer is diagnosed at stage 0 or stage 1, over 90% of women can survive and thrive. You may have heard recently that Katie Couric from the Today Show announced her breast cancer diagnosis. She's stage 1A. And she's talked a lot about how she was late to getting her mammogram because of COVID. And I think it was a really important moment, I think, for women across the country to hear Katie Couric talking so clearly about that, about the need for screening, the need to stay on top of your screening, even during COVID. I heard Dr. Mansi talking about that when I joined. And the earlier you detect, the better your chances are for effective treatment and survival. And then, as the stages are later, stage 4, it's the survival rates decrease. So it's just really important to be focusing on early detection, and then also to be advocating for yourself to make sure that you are getting the screenings that you need. If you have dense breast tissue, if you have a family history, if you have other risk factors. At the Brem Foundation, all of our education, our advocacy, and our access programs are really focused on that, on helping women to advocate for themselves and to empower them to improve their health. Next slide. There are sobering facts here. Over 42,000 women are projected to die from breast cancer this year. And then over 280,000 new cases are expected to be diagnosed. we are committed to changing this. And I think we're really passionate about this. I would encourage you all to spend some time, as I mentioned, with our resources, whether it's on our website, our videos, or otherwise, because I think we just have a lot of great tools for people to put to use to advocate for their own health, so that, and I think we have a really empowering message too. We don't like to get caught up in sort of the downer stats, but we like to turn that on its head and talk about how, as women, we really do have the ability to take our own health and advocate for ourselves. Next slide. I talked about the downloadable education content. Please feel free to go to our website and check it out. There's a wealth of materials there. Next slide. And then, yes, I talked a little bit about this, but this is really just the slide that gives you sort of a schematic on our impact, the work that we do through education, through access and advocacy. Through our partnership with Lyft that I mentioned earlier, where we provide cost-free rides to women who can't afford to get to their screening services, we just hit our 1,000th ride this month. So we're thrilled about that milestone. And we're just going to keep sort of shouting it from the mountaintops and making sure that you know, all of our partners and all of the women who are eligible for the services are learning about it, so that they understand that when you're going through a really difficult time, when you're negotiating this breast cancer issue and potential diagnosis, many of the women that we deal with already have very complex lives. They have complex financial situations. Sometimes they've been really hard impacted by COVID. So we're looking to remove as many of those barriers as we can for women. And that's really what the Brem Foundation is committed to doing through our three-pronged approach. So that's the general information. Please follow us on social media. Please feel free to be in touch with me, with Natalie, with anybody on the staff. We're small, four-person team, but mighty. And then we have a fantastic board of directors who leads us. So thanks for giving me a minute to talk about the Brem Foundation tonight.
Thank you so much, Claire, for that wonderful overview. If any of you guys have any questions, we are going to open the floor for questions at this time. I see something in the chat. Got it. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions while we have Dr. Mancy on the line, feel free to ask any questions. Also have the chat option available.
And if you guys don't have any questions right now, that's okay. I'm available through social media, or I know the Brem Foundation is always posting some really good, helpful stuff. They post pretty much consistently, whether it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month or not, but especially during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And then their link here gives you some good resources, and you can download some things that you can kind of get some information on. But yeah, I mean, questions or not, just get your screening mammograms. And if you're too young to get a screening mammogram, talk to your doctor about when you will be eligible to. And if you have a family history, especially talk to your doctor about genetic testing. And I'm happy to answer any questions, whether it's here or later. So thank you again, guys, for having me in case if we don't have any questions.
Awesome, awesome. So I don't think anyone has any questions at the moment. I do appreciate everyone taking time out of their schedule to be here today. Something I did, that I didn't discuss with Natalie or anybody in the Brem Foundation, I just kind of took it upon myself, and I wanted to raise donations just to kind of give back and say thank you, for allowing Canigrieve to collaborate and really just educate people. And so we were able to raise, or I should say through donations, we raised $175. And I, on behalf of Canigrieve, decided to match that. And so I have a check here for you guys that I guess I'm going to have to drop off or mail for a total of $350. And so I know, you guys didn't ask, but like I said, it's just a small token of appreciation for really what you guys are doing out here in the community. Is really needed, and we appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ebony. That really means a lot. And as you said, we weren't expecting it. We didn't ask for it, but it really, every dollar counts, and we hustle for every single dollar at the Brem Foundation. So your generosity and your matching of that gift is really appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies. And Natalie, I definitely want to thank you. You've been working with me this whole time to put this program together. So I really just want to thank you as well for all your effort and collaboration. And obviously, Ms. Skillen for connecting the dots. I appreciate everybody that was on the line today. I really did.
Thanks, Ebony. I'm glad that we could get together and that we could get this important information out to your people. So it was great to all be together this evening. And thank you so much, Dr. Monsey, for being on with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye.